Welcome back to another episode of the Brick by Brick Young Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Luke Kramer, and today we have a special guest, one of my closest friends, one of the hardest workers I know, extremely talented, blessed to call him a friend of mine and one of my business partners, Jackson Armitage, in the house with us today. So excited to get him on the podcast. He claims that this podcast is going to get 1 billion views. So we'll see if that's the truth. But welcome, Jackson. Thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Luke. That's quite the introduction. So hopefully this thing gets 1 million views. But no, excited to be on here and hang out with you for a little bit today and just talk.
Yeah. No, we've been wanting to get Jackson on for a while. He's been with Freed in our company. He's considered family to me and the rest of us. He's been with us for about 3 years. And prior to that, lived in New Orleans and did some wholesaling and real estate down there. So I really just want to open up the floor to you to share a little bit about your story, getting into business in general with your tree business, and then the time in New Orleans and now here. What does that look like, and how has it shaped your future now?
Yeah. So I guess if I'm, going to think about it, let's rewind all the way back. I've really spent my whole life growing up. I was a sports junkie. So it was football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring. And because of that, even in high school, I was doing camps in the summers and everything. So I never really had time to just go get a W-2 job. So my dad was like, when I was in high school, I was the same way. I mowed yards. So I was like, all right, I have a truck. That's what I'm going to do. Let's throw a mower in the back and knock on doors. I was in middle school, probably knocking on doors in my neighborhood in Gretna and just asking people if I could mow their yards for $20 a week. Mm-hmm. So I never really had the experience of working a W-2 job. And senior year of high school, I sold my truck. Going to college, I went to Concordia University in Seward and played football and did track there. And so I was like, that commute from Gretna to Seward, let's get something with better gas mileage than my F-250 that got 8 miles to the gallon.
F-250 gas.
That's it. And so I sold the truck and got a job at Walmart. And it was really eye-opening to me that I didn't want to work for anyone else, because I've always just been hardworking, get stuff done and get paid for results. And every day I would show up, it's like people are just punching in and punching out and going through life with really no goals. They're like, I'm going to be here forever. And that didn't excite me. So went to college, got into business, and, was still playing 2 sports in college. So after freshman year that summer, Miles Hemphill, will give a shout out to Miles and me. COVID hit. We were both back in Gretna for the summer. So we were like, what can we do to make money? Because it's also COVID and no one's hiring. So we were like, well, there's dead trees. Let's go cut down trees. And really that's what sparked, the whole entrepreneur side of me, because now it was growing a business. It was, going out and knocking doors. So doing sales, putting out flyers and doing marketing, and then also actually doing the work. So a lot of it is, in a business like that, it's word of mouth is your best friend. So you got to, go above and beyond and do good work. So people say, hey, my neighbor's got a dead tree. Let's, call up Jackson and Miles, and they'll come get it done and make it look like there was never anything there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what really sparked the idea of entrepreneurship and getting into a business, is kind of just being naive to anything else and just always doing it.
Mm-hmm. So I want to pause there on the tree business that you and Miles were running. Was the outreach all door knocking and getting rejected at the door? Tell me about your acquisition strategy for clients.
Really, we said, what's the easiest way to find clients in that? And how do we get clients that don't have ginormous trees in a tiny backyard where we can hit the house? Because when we started it, we honestly really had no idea what we were doing.
Yeah.
We just said, we got a truck, we got a trailer, and we got ambition. So let's go do it.
Yeah.
So it really started by drive around acreage neighborhoods and just look for a dead pine tree all the way in the back of the yard where there was no risk and knock on the front door and say, hey, I see you got a dead pine tree in the back of your yard. We're a tree removal company, and I was wondering what your plans were for it. And most of the time they'd say, give us a quote. And that's really was all of our outreach. So it would be a lot of, as you start to get jobs in those neighborhoods, you're always, driving around them. So looking for other trees in the neighborhood, similar to real estate, driving for dollars. But just, Gretna's our home base. Let's get, every dead tree in Gretna and cut it down, and the neighbors see you hauling sticks through the yard and stuff like that. So that was really our whole outreach. It was never anything outside of, handing out flyers at the door and talking to people.
So how did that, prepare you for getting into real estate as an agent? I know that's kind of where you started. Tell us about the transition from running a business and the skills you learned and the stuff you were doing to then being an agent on the service side. What drew you to be an agent in the first place?
I think I realized when I was doing that business that the value, you really get paid for how much value you can provide. And also, just building relationships. Like the first time I walked up to one of those doors, I was terrified. Like, what do I say? Am I going to look like an idiot up here? Yeah. No one wants to talk to me. Just a lot of this internal narrative stuff that, you get as you ring the doorbell and you're standing there and it feels like hours that you're waiting for them to answer. And I think that's what really prepared me. The transition into real estate was, I liked real estate. I'd always, just enjoyed houses and construction and, was kind of tied into it in landscaping. In high school, doing mulch and mowing for a lot of people that, were property managers and had rentals. So I always wanted to do something in that space. And really the shift was a guy, Tyson Compton. I'll give a shout out to him too. Me and Miles got a tree job where we were cutting down a tree for Tyson. And that's what really just started the conversation. He was in real estate and looking to grow his team, the Milestone Group. And, I was actively working on getting my license. And so that just kind of spiraled to, let's sit down and let's talk. And through conversation, we were like, let's do this. I kind of was at a point where I was ready to just go into work. I was going to Concordia and I was playing sports, and I'm like, I'm not going to the Olympics and track. I'm not going to the NFL. So let's hang up the cleats and, go start working. So that's kind of what sparked the idea of real estate and, jump full time as a real estate agent. So primarily working with buyers looking to buy their first house or move up because they had, more kids or life changes that, would cause them to move.
Was that everything it was cracked up to be when you were getting into the real estate as an agent? I know it's attractive to a lot of people. Was that, as nice as people say it is, or?
I think it was harder than people say it is. You watch HGTV and you're like, oh my gosh, I got this sheet of paper that says I'm an agent. I'm going to, go out and make $100,000 this month, like those people on Selling Sunsets and all of those shows that make it look so easy.
Yeah.
And then you get into the business and you realize, I got in when I was 19. So I'm 19 years old. I have never bought a house myself. So not only am I trying to learn, the side of owning a business, I'm also trying to learn how to even transact a real estate transaction because I've never done it. I've only rented, one house in my life at that point in college that I lived in. And, I just didn't know what I didn't know. So it was a lot more learning up front and getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Because I think I battled a lot of, just walking into a room and people look at you as the expert because that's your profession. But then in your own mind, you're like, I'm so young. Why would they listen to me? Or, they've already moved 3 times in their life and I've never sold a house. So why would they, want my advice? But I think just as you continue to learn and work through that, you're like, okay, I actually do know this stuff. And, there is a lot of value I can provide. So the proof's kind of in the pudding there. Once you start to do a couple transactions, you're like, okay, I can do this. And you kind of gain the confidence.
Yeah. And I felt the same way early on, sometimes I still do, like walk into a room and this person's been in the business for 30 years, or they've been buying houses for 30 years, and that narrative creeps up. Like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't belong in the room. You're not qualified. And it is tough, but I think, what you're saying is that the reps and just doing it ignorantly and being naive is really what gave you the confidence to say, I can do it. And I can be in this room. Is that right?
That's right. And I think the biggest thing for me was, getting comfortable saying, I don't know the answer to that. Like, I wanted to be the solution to every problem. So if someone would say something, I'd, be like, okay, let's figure it out. But I realized it's okay to not know and say, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go do my homework and I'm going to get you the answer to that. Or I'm going to connect you with someone who does know the answer to it. You don't have to, have the answer to every question.
Yeah. And I think it's a point of pride, I think, for a lot of us being young. Like, we want to kill the deer and bring it home, and say, look what I got. We want to feed the family, or, just, there's pride in that. There's pride in ownership, and there's pride in getting something done and saying, oh yeah, I can help you out, when there's really more to be proud about, I should say, and saying, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And then you learn that way too.
And I think people respect it, because a lot of the times when you go say, hey, I know this, and you're just kind of guessing, people can smell bullshit pretty easy. Yeah. And they know. And at least for me, when I'm talking to someone, if they say, I don't know the answer to that and I'm going to go figure it out, it honestly gives me a lot of trust. It's like, okay, this guy's not lying to me. He's, following through on what he says he's going to do. And there's a lot of value in that too, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So going from being an agent and seeing that the service side and getting some reps in there, calling people and transacting real estate, getting some confidence, how did you transition into, the investment side? What made you interested in it, and what kept you, going on the real estate side, knowing that it was, you're still early on and figuring things out?
I think it was partly hanging out with you, and me and Luke have been friends, for those listening that don't know us, for a long time. Yeah. So I'd always seen him, went over to his house here in Omaha that he was flipping, and brought all the boys living with him in there. So I'd go hang out over there and just kind of, saw it from that side as I was an agent. And I think the other real shift was realizing, as an agent, you don't have the benefits of 401k. You don't have, the benefits of big retirement in this. So you're stuck in the industry for a long time. There's really no exit of that business, because when you stop selling a house, you stop getting paid. So you are the business. You almost need to do something else, because you are your business. So it's hard to make it self-managing. Besides growing a team and bringing a bunch of people on there, which didn't excite me as much. So I was like, I need to do something different, because, I have goals that, I don't have a family, but one day, I want to be able to go to my kids' sports games and not have to have that interfere with going and showing someone houses. And real estate, I was already in it. So the investment side was kind of the path to be able to do that. So went and met with you and your dad, Mike, and said, I'm interested in the investment side of real estate and just learning, and what does that look like? And through conversation with there, it was really, hey, your first step will be wholesaling. That's what we're doing. So moved down to New Orleans. We got a guy, Alex, down there who's trying to scale his business. And I think that was kind of a test for me, like, how committed is this guy to doing this and stepping into a whole new industry? And I was kind of looked at it like, I'm young, I might as well. What is there to lose?
Yeah, I mean, I always give you props for that, because I've heard the story a lot, and I was down in New Orleans with you, but it's, you were 1,000 miles away from your family. You didn't have any friends down there. How did you make that work? Like, what kept you going down there? Because I know it wasn't easy.
I think for me, it was really the ambition of, like, I'm out on this journey to do this. And even though, I wasn't close to family, I didn't have my friends down there, which was really hard to move to a city where you don't have the support. Like here in Omaha, everyone's in my corner. I could have terrible day and I could call my mom and she'd, hype me up.
Yeah.
So being down there, you're so far, but at the same time, it's like, I'm doing this, for my family and for my friends and to build this for myself. And I think that's what kind of just kept pushing me. Like, I'm down here for a purpose and I'm down here to learn. And looking at it through that lens, is kind of foot to the gas. Let's get deals done. Let's get the reps and, get to a point where I understand how the off-market side of real estate comes so I can move back to Nebraska and grow something here. Mm-hmm. So it's really, the more work I put in down there, the faster I can get back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that's the conversation we had a couple times. Like, at what point do you feel it's time to come back?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know it was never, it maybe could have been long-term, if you found a lady down there or something. For the record, Jackson is single, you guys, so hit him up. But you kind of had the idea that you wanted to come back, after a while. Mm-hmm. And once you made that transition, you're back in Nebraska and joining our team, and that was something that I felt was always kind of destined to happen as you were going down to New Orleans. Like, we never knew Alex was going to come up here and join our team. But, with you joining as well, how did that, the experience in New Orleans set you up for coming back here and doing things?
So I think down in New Orleans, it was really, sharpen my sword and learn how real estate happens. Learn from Alex, who's, a great operator down there and had killed it in the wholesale space, probably one of the bigger wholesalers in New Orleans, and then transition that into buying rental properties. So down there, I really stepped into the wholesale world where you have to be an expert at analyzing what's a deal to investors and what isn't. Mm-hmm. And, learning the never split the difference, black swan stuff, and learning how to analyze a rehab budget and learning, how do I talk to sellers, how do I make offers? Mm-hmm. And, I learned pretty quick that, the market tells you if it's a good deal or not. So if you go, buy a wholesale deal in about an hour of posting that thing on Facebook, if you did your job right or not.
Yeah, they're pretty quick with it. Generally, and I want you to explain wholesaling, but generally with wholesaling, if the property is not a deal, you post in Facebook, and now in Nebraska the laws have changed, so you can't do that. But you'd have 10 people reach out in the first 10 minutes if it was a deal. Mm-hmm. If it's not, you have 10 people in 10 days. And pretty quick when somebody walks in there, if you're not getting an offer after 3 people, then you're probably, not going to get it sold at the price you're at.
Yeah.
So explain what wholesaling is a little bit for the viewers that don't know what it is.
Yeah. So wholesaling is basically you're an agent for off-market properties. So 95% of the properties are going to be sold on the market. They're going to be sold to a family and the next buyer, and an agent's going to list it or help them buy it. And it's just going to be transacted like, everything you see on Zillow. And as a wholesaler, you're really focused on the 5% of the market that no one sees. So properties with distress, think, someone's behind on their mortgage payments, or they have this house that they inherited and they live out of state and the tenants there are horrible and they're writing a check every month to keep it. Mm-hmm. And, it's really going after those properties that are also beat down. So as an agent, you're getting a percentage of the list price. And when you're wholesaling, you're basically, exchanging the rights to purchase that property. So you're going to get it under contract. Let's say it's a $20,000 house and you get it at $20,000. It's a deal to someone else that's going to flip it at $30,000. So you're going to assign the rights over to them and make the middle money. So you'd make a $10,000 assignment fee. Mm-hmm. And for those people that are stuck with the $20,000 house, there's really no solution because conventional financing isn't going to give them a loan on it. FHA isn't going to give them a loan. And it's going to be really hard to find an agent that wants to, list that thing on the market, go through all that work for 2% of 20,000. Mm-hmm. And they're, almost left to figure it out on their own and looking for a solution. So I think, that's wholesaling at a high level view of, you're basically get a property under contract. You either, can hold it yourself and flip it, or there's, meat on the bone for someone else to be able to go do it and make money too. So you're just trading paper essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Selling paper is what I like to say sometimes. So through that experience, wholesaling in New Orleans, you came back here, joined our team. What is your role now? What do you do? You're jack of trades, and share with our viewers what you do, what you specialize in. It's a lot, but what's kind of a breakdown of your roles?
I think for me, I'm kind of the freed Swiss Army knife and kind of do everything. So work directly with Luke on the acquisitions. So essentially, meet sellers, make offers, build relationships with people that are out there, selling single family houses or multifamily apartment complexes. I'm also in our freed lending world as a loan officer. So, if there's an end buyer or someone that's, wanting to do a project, don't have the capital themselves to do it, we can come in and help them fund that deal and walk them through, where does hard money come in and how do you exit hard money? Because it is really just a short-term solution to help them get running with their real estate portfolio. Mm-hmm. And I also do a little bit of leasing stuff for us too. I've stepped out of that role more. When I first came back, that was kind of my sole duty was, let's get these vacant units we have leased out. So the owners are all cash flowing. And those are kind of my three big buckets, as well as this community. So we have our Freed by Real Estate community, which I'm sure, people watching are a part of that. Just being a face in there, being a guide, answering questions, and just getting to know a lot of the people out there. I think real estate has kind of became, this hot thing recently. So there's a lot of people that want to get into it or learn about it. So just being, a face and a resource that someone can reach out to and ask questions, and I'll shoot them straight and tell them, from my experiences, what it's like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And real estate, to your point, has always been kind of a shiny object, even for me at times. It's like, I liked the property because I think a certain way about it, but the reality is it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, and wealth isn't created overnight. You might have a deal where you make 50 grand or 100 grand, and that's great, but that's still going to deplete if you don't go and replace it or have passive income through, rentals or other things. So in your experience and doing all of the things within the business, how has it shaped you and taught you? I like to, there's a quote that I saw, it's not about what you get, it's about what you become. And I think that's such a good quote for what we do, because yes, when we buy a property, we get the long-term appreciation, we get the cash flow and, the balance sheet, you see a property go on there, you see your net worth go up. It's great. But I think there's a lot of pain in this business too, and a lot of struggle, and we're always in the messy middle. So how has this changed who you've become and shaped the way you think about yourself as a man?
Mm-hmm. I think it's, kind of showed me that, one small thing you do, it kind of reflects on everything you do. And I know when I got into this business, I talked to Mike a lot about, my goal is I want to own a real estate investment company. And now, I'm still with the Freed team and probably going to be with the Freed team my whole life. But back then it was, everyone within Freed had their own business, and they all operated their own business before we joined forces and said, let's grow this bigger than us. So my goal was, sit at the same table as everyone else and have my own business. So I told him, I want to learn everything from, leasing to acquisitions to dispositions to property management, accounting, maybe not that. I'll hire someone for that, but learn it all, because I just feel like the more knowledge the more apt you are to be able to go out and grow that. And it just kind of, I think the skills I've learned from that, reflect into everything. Like, you're never, know too much to stop learning. There's always more you can learn. There's always ways things are changing. So just continue to stay open and not get bogged down to like, this is the way I've always done it and this is the only way I'm going to do it, because the world's ever changing and, emotions are always high. And so just, staying on the straight and narrow of, I'm going to learn, I'm going to continue to implement. And if something's not working, I'm going to get rid of it and, find something new that's going to work and keep pushing the needle for me.
Being your own boss, how does that change your schedule and your life? And has it opened up free time? Has it allowed you to do things that you thought it would, or has it, been a mess?
I think, it's been a mix of both. They kind of say as an entrepreneur, you will work 80 hours for yourself so that you don't have to work 40 hours for someone else.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty true statement. But at the same time, I do have the freedom to be able to go do what I want. Like if I'm, hey, let's go golf. I don't have to, plan it 2 weeks in advance and put in my time off, because I can adjust my schedule. As long as I'm, getting my stuff done and not slowing down the business, I'm able to go do that stuff. So I think that's been, something I'm super grateful of is, being able to spend time with family or go on vacation or hang out with my friends, because I'm doing all the work outside of that, and have the systems in place that, if I go out of town, Luke can pick up my slack for a couple days.
Yeah. No, it's always nice to have. Like, I think the internal team that we've built, it's high trust and it's performance, and I know that if I need something done, Jackson's going to do it. And I hope it's the same way, vice versa. But with a high trust environment and being a performer, how do you, reconcile that outside of the office, when you're at home or, it's been a tough week and maybe you didn't get the results you wanted on something, because in acquisitions, that's how it goes. We have a deal that we're excited about and then falls through for whatever reason. How do you reconcile that? And like, what keeps you grounded in this business, and the other business as well, to, just pick it up the next day and keep going? Because I know you're a performer and you judge yourself and you feel the weight of that.
Yeah. And I definitely do. And I sit there and, get in my head about I didn't accomplish enough, or I set out on this goal and I fell short of it. And I think that's a real thing. But something, I've realized is everyone has that. Like you can't be 100% perfect all the time. And if you are, your goals aren't big enough. And I think for me, it was, really narrowing in my why, which is ever changing, but what keeps you going? Because owning a business is hard, and doing what we do, it's not easy. Like it's a lot more time, it's a lot more effort, and you take work home with you every day because you are the work. And I think for me, it was, I wanted to be an entrepreneur because I've always been just wired that way. And not a lot of people in my family have been entrepreneurs. So I was like, I want to go out on this journey to show that it can be done for myself and my friends and, my future generations. My kids one day can say, school's not for me. I don't enjoy it, but I can go start a business because my dad started a business or my grandpa started a business. And so I think for me, continuing to say, even when something gets hard or you didn't reach the goals you wanted, there's a bigger purpose for this. And the only way you can't get there is if you just, decide to lay down and quit. So I think for me, that's been the big driving factor is, reflect on why am I doing what I'm doing? And that can always change. And sometimes it's hard because sometimes you ask yourself, the flip side of that, like, yeah, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I think when you have a purpose and something, bigger than yourself that you're pushing towards, that's really, what keeps you showing up. And
no, it means something different, and it's like you said, there's days where you have a shit day, and it's not, you go home and you're like, man, this sucks. But I think part of it too, for me, is having people like you, or Nate, who's not here, miss you, Nate, around you that just know what you're going through, what you're experiencing, and are doing the same thing. Like you said, everybody goes through that stuff. And we've seen a lot more of that in the, coaching and the stuff we're doing. Is like everybody has their own struggles and issues, but you can't be the victim. You know, if you make yourself the victim, then everything happens to you, you know, where it's a lot harder, you know, it's easier said than done, but it happens for you, you know, and taking that and, you know, using it as a learning opportunity to grow and learn and be better for it. And, you know, I'm curious, like, have you had an experience that you thought was the end of your career, or so, like, at that time was so heartbreaking that you couldn't go on, and then now you're here? Have you had anything like that?
I think, you know, as I got down to New Orleans, I got down there my first 2 weeks, I got the first wholesale deal that we did. And, you know, we got it under contract. We posted on Facebook. We, you know, found the end buyer in one day. And I was like, no way, this is that easy. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. Well, the New Orleans market was shifting and people were moving out of the city. Another hurricane hit. So insurance rates were just skyrocketing, you know, almost like 200% increases. And people are now, you know, not buying there because, you know, even though interest rates were at an all-time low, the insurance was so high you couldn't cash flow. And, you know, there was a lot of deals out there, but it was really hard to find an end buyer. So there was, you know, a 4-month stint there where probably 3 or 4 months where not another deal happened. You know, we get stuff under contract, go try and find an end buyer, it would fall apart, or the seller, you know, would find another solution or list it on the market, and, you know, it's just tough to find deals. And I was like, this might be the end. I might have to move back to Nebraska and, you know, get my license or go get a 9-to-5, because I thought this wholesale thing was going to be sweet. Now it's, you know, just draining my bank account, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. You're in a whole nother city with no family or friends, and it's not going the way you planned. How did you get around that?
I think for me, just having, you know, family back here that continued to support me, and, you know, just realizing that starting a business is never easy. You go listen to any podcast of any business expert, you know, they talk about the times when they were living in their car or doing whatever. And so I was like, I still got a roof over my head. You know, I'm still, you know, actively doing this. Like, there's no point to just giving up on it. I kind of set out here for a reason. So I think for me, that was a lot of it. Just kind of having faith and, you know, God's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's times in business where deals are slim, but, you know, there's never been a time where I went completely broke. So that's, you know, been a blessing. And kind of just realizing that it's, you know, God's direction or God's protection, and he's going to protect you as you're going out and you're doing these things. So I think for me, that was the biggest thing. Just, you know, although deals weren't coming, just, you know, all you can do is take the next right step.
Yeah. I love it.
And if I fail, and I can move back to Nebraska and go get a 9-to-5.
Yeah.
I'm 21 at that point. So it's like, I got a long life ahead. I can, you know, fail multiple times and, you know, keep trying at this thing.
And then that's what I love about you so much, is it's the I'll figure it out attitude. Like, nothing is too big or too challenging for me to not figure it out. And even if it is, you don't know it. You know, you're too naive, and then you jump into it and somehow it's done. We're like, how the hell did you do that? So I think that's a testament to your work ethic and just the way that you're brought up, you know, as well as the things that you've learned and brought into yourself, you know, through the experience that you've had. You know, you've completely changed the way that you think too, into, you know, not somebody that's a victim, but somebody that has the control and can go and change things. So when we talk about, you know, future goals, and, you know, it sounds like your why is really what's kept you rooted in faith and, you know, in business. Your why is much bigger, and through all the struggle, you're still here. So tell us a little about why you do this. I know it's not for 99 overall Madden team or MLB The Show team.
The Show. I do this so I can, you know, make enough money to buy all the packs in the game and get a 99 overall team. No, I'm kidding. I I think for me, I'm continuing to do this. Really, it's been a shift to see, if my true why and my purpose is to help other people realize that, they can start a business and they can grow a business. Really being able to give back to those guys. So people in our community or people that are looking to, grow and scale a business, just be another resource for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what's kind of been pushing me right now is like, there's a lot of people in the world that are sitting where I was when I moved to New Orleans and trying to figure it out. And luckily, I had a great family that supported me. I had Luke back here, who's basically family. I had Alex, who's like family down there, all in my corner, but there's people out there that don't have people in their corner. So lean on me. Mm-hmm. Like I'll tell you, it's not easy. But in business, life isn't magically one day just going to give you a ton of deals, and you have to kind of create results for yourself. And leaning on someone that's, been in your same shoes and found a way to just keep pushing through it, I think is valuable. So mine's, purpose right now has been a lot more, continue to I wouldn't call it educate, but just, be a fly on the wall for these guys and answer questions and, educate if they want. I don't like to say educate because I don't like to stand at the front of the board and, preach, but more just sit down and have conversations and, go through my struggles and their struggles and, how can I be additive to what they're trying to grow?
Mm-hmm. So what advice, we're going to bring this to a close. I know we have a meeting coming up, but what advice would you give someone, the New Orleans the guy that was just about to go down there, take a huge risk, move to a different city? What advice do you give to people like that?
The advice I would give is that starting a business isn't supposed to be easy, and life isn't just going to, give you a bouquet of flowers and say everything's all right. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner, you start to find your purpose in what you're doing. So I'd say, just continue to stack days. Don't be, so sure that you want something that you wouldn't accept something better. It's one thing we always say here. But by, saying that, I mean, as you're focusing on the next deal, don't get your view so clouded into, making money that you don't go serve a bigger purpose. Because when you start to shift your mind to how do I help people? How do I provide value? How do I build lasting relationships? The monetary side of it's going to come. Mm-hmm. It's just the way the world works. Yeah. So I'd tell myself, don't get so scarce minded and, caught up in every single deal. Just look at it from the big picture of, how do I continue to help people and how do I continue to build relationships, and it'll all come back to me somehow. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it doesn't, and I just have a bunch of friends.
Yeah, and that's not bad either. I know we always say like, hey, if we don't ever do business, we're still going to be friends. Uh-huh. And we have a lot of friends because of that. But I think your story is a huge, I think of you as a role model to a lot of people that, were once you, the younger version of you, and being able to say, hey, I've done these things, I've gone through the struggle, and I'm still here, I'm still standing. Mm-hmm. I think that the reality is, like you said, life is hard. The world is not an easy place, and it's not just gonna, like you said, give you a bouquet of flowers, but there's people around you, that support you, care about you, and want the best for you. And that's the advice I would give too, is surround yourself with the right people. And if you're doing that, then things don't seem as hard. I don't feel crazy for wanting the things that I want because you also want them. Mm-hmm. And that makes a huge impact on me to know that I can do this and I can do it with other people and we're on the same track. And I don't feel like an outcast or that I'm, doing something stupid for going out and chasing my dreams, because you're doing it, and that having people around you just, it does so much for me personally as well. Just knowing that I'm not crazy. Well, I might be, but you are too.
We'll live in the crazy world together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time to hop on here and share your story. I think moving forward, I'd love to have you on more and more as your role continues to grow and your portfolio continues to grow. Jackson is an owner with us of Freed by Real Estate. And I know we both have big goals to build big portfolios and eventually, support a family that's non-existent right now. So we'll both work on that too. But thank you guys. Is there anything that you want to say?
I don't think so. I think, thanks for having me on here. It's kind of cool. I've never publicly shared my story and, sat in front of a camera and just chatted. So it's been fun being on here and appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come sit in the room with you and BS.
We should have done it sooner. Yeah, no, Jackson is, if you didn't hear it here, a great resource. He's one of the hardest workers I know. I said it, in the beginning in my intro, but he kicks ass. I like to call him my clone, even though he's probably a better version of me. But I think if you guys need a resource or support, or you just want somebody to talk to about your story, Jackson is a great person to do that with. Has a heart to help and serve. We'll plug your information down below. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Peace.